know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose one year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. This week, we are talking about an album released in the year 2015. And if you know our show, that might not be great.
It's a rare one for a reason.
Yeah, we don't hit the 2010s that often due to audiences' lack of interest. But I
Due
do
to poor ratings. The 2010s we are not renewing.
But I think albums that are 10 years old are fair game to be talked about on this show.
Yeah.
Come on, people. Let's talk about some old records. They're old records. 10 years is a long
They're
time.
old ones.
You idiot.
They don't stay babies forever.
Oh, but we will get more into our 2015 bag in a little bit. If you go to patreon.com/punklautopod, for $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. Where last week, what did we do?
We did a news of the world, which are pretty fun, where we typically kind of kick it off looking at punknews.org. Very active. Seems like it's all entirely run by one person.
It really does. I think it's like that M. Moore. I think she's like doing everything for the website.
There's like two people that work there. Yeah. So your premier source for punk news, punknews.org. Much more timely, much more on top of things days, which is good because it was pretty bad for a long time.
Yeah. It was around that time period where it was Buzz Media who bought them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the weird buyout thing, but like it's back to the original guy who owns it. Yeah. So yeah, we look at punk news. Usually spend a good chunk of time there. Look at Brooklyn Vegan and occasionally other sites. Just try and talk about things that are in the news since the last time we did one. And there was a good bit to talk about.
Yeah, we got a lot in that episode, which are always fun to do. And I keep saying this every week. Metalcore Chronicles is on its way. There's just a lot of stuff from 1991 for me to research and write about. So it is coming. I promise. It's just, I got to read about like Chokehold lineups from 1991. So I got to figure out who's in the band and all that stuff. So just give me some time. Though I really was contemplating. I'm like, is Chokehold metalcore enough to really be considered? I ultimately landed on yes. But not, unfortunately, this demo is not. But I think they're kind of there.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough.
Especially for that early era of metalcore.
Yeah. I did eliminate one from this upcoming episode, because I'm doing 91, and Rate Your Music had this EP listed as a 91 release, and it did not come out in 91. It came out in 1993. Like, I have no idea where they even got the year 91 for that, because the label that it came out on didn't put their first record out until 93. So it's like, where did this number come from? It was the website with the only 1991 information about that EP. So I was like, what? What is this? But so I corrected that and got that fixed. Nobody fought me, and none of the admins fought me on that. But yeah, that'll be coming soon. And if you sign up for our $5 producer tier, you get your name said on the show every single week, including whatever it is that you produce, put out, sponsor, all that good stuff. So first off, thank you to our producer, Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. Still working on the letter D, a lot of letter D bands. Thanks to the Germans, mostly. Thank you to Dave Brown, host of the podcast One Band, 5 Songs. Thank you to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Nerd Radio. And last week I said it was so that they could focus on more nerd culture in general. That's not actually the case. The rock was dropped from the name because they don't play music on the show anymore. So that makes sense. I guess I should have waited and read that first. And thank you to Zach in Oregon with his very sweet Veteran Flashbacks work shirt. So yeah, if you want your name said on the show, head over to Patreon, join our $5 tier, where you also get access to a once monthly exclusive bonus audio focused on an EP And by the time this episode is out, the producer exclusive poll where you get to vote on which EP we discuss will be up. We haven't made our selections yet, so I won't tell you the names yet because we don't have them. But we'll leave this poll up for maybe like a week or two, and then we'll decide which one we talk about. If you want to get in there and have your voice heard, join that $5 tier. And then for $10, you get to choose the album we devote an entire episode to. So patreon.com/punklautopod. You got anything to promote? No, I guess you're working on booking, but you don't have anything ready yet, right?
April 10th, my band Major Awards will be playing a show. Lineup is not fully set yet, but we'll be playing at Redwood Bar in downtown LA. So listen up for more details on that. Follow us on Instagram at Major Awards Band. Just follow us on Instagram. Twitter, I'm using less and less and less, and I'm trying to get banned, like saying things about like Elon Musk and what he should do to himself. It sucks, and it's worthless to look at because like it's only just like the last stragglers of people posting. So follow me on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. We're not very active there, but hopefully we'll start posting more there again. I'm trying to actually like take video of practice and stuff. Got to generate the content so for the internet and play the game, but should see some updates from us from time to time, at least once a week or so, and hopefully get some more details on shows. Trying very aggressively to book some shows and at least try and get one show a month going, get some momentum. But we definitely have April locked down, working out some details on March, and then I'm going to start pushing for May and June soon. So hopefully you'll be able to see us. If you're in the greater Southern California area and you think we should come play there, tell me, and I will find a bar in your town and try and book a show there. Or even, I'll go to Northern California.
What's that city that Mad Caddies are from?
Solvang?
Yeah.
There's nothing in Solvang. I don't think anybody plays shows there. I mean, Solvang is like a destination in itself. It's like a little Danish town. But yeah, anyway, that's the biggest thing. Just, figuring out our next moves. But
yeah,
big things coming.
Uh-oh. Don't say that. You'll never do anything again.
Been saying that.
Don't put it in your Instagram bio. That's always the sign that a band will never come back. All right. So like I said at the top, this week's episode, we are talking about the year 2015, and it was my turn to select the album for us to discuss. But before that, previously in 2015, we have discussed Tenement's Predatory Headlights in episode 194. And I'm not telling tales out of school or anything like that, but we got one of the members of Tenement to message us after that episode went up. And we weren't glowing on that episode, but it was nice to have him reach out because he wasn't negative on us. He was kind of like, I get it. It was a tough record. It's kind of like he's like a double album following up our like really hit album is kind of, we're a lot of experimental stuff on it. Yeah, we get it. So then we go way back to episode 78. So we don't do an episode for over 100 on 2015. But we discussed Chelsea Wolfe's Abyss, as well as Football Etc.'s Disappear EP. And we did that with the host of the podcast, Pass the Mic, which sadly she wound up quitting that podcast not long after we did that episode. And she never came back to podcasting. So fun. And then episode 16, we did Coliseum's Anxiety's Kiss and Super Unison's self-titled EP. So yeah, way back there. All right, so 2015. This is the first time we're doing this since we updated our year rotation. There was a period there where we were going all the way up to like the recent year, and then we wound up scaling that back and changing the rule to being, okay, we'll just do 10 years back. So this is the first year in a couple that 2015 has been on the table for us to choose an album from. So this stuff's 10 years old, and it doesn't feel like it was 10 years ago, but that's just because we're getting older.
Why, that was just yesterday. It does and it doesn't. It's kind of how it feels.
Yeah.
Like I have, probably more vivid memories of 10 years ago day-to-day life from now than I did 10 years before 2015. In 2015, like 10 years ago, 10 years prior to that would have seemed longer ago to me than 10 years ago does now.
Well, that makes sense though. That's
It's
your
just that
age
time
and
dilation of age. And
yeah. Things feel closer the older you get. Because you're right. Yeah, in 2015, it would have been harder to remember what was happening in 2005. So I don't know. 2005 was a pretty big year for me personally. So that year was pretty easy for me to remember. But yeah, maybe like in 2017, 2007 might have been harder to remember. But
yeah. But it still seems like a long time ago though when you dig into it, I guess, you know.
Yeah, I was going through trying to decide what to talk about this week. And I pulled a couple records. I pulled actually a bunch of stuff, and then I wound up like paring it down to 5 and sending you those 5 picks. And I had a lot of stuff. I was like, there's some big stuff that came out that year that was important to me personally, but I don't know that it was necessarily that big to music in general. Because this is the time period where we usually say like, these weren't big years or great years for like punk music. And it is and it isn't. It is in the sense for like the greater popularity of punk music, where we're on a down slope. Like we're beginning to go downhill pretty fast in 2015. But like we also say, there's always something good every single year. So there's always something to listen to and enjoy. I guess I could blame part of that on everyone kind of like getting into their own little lanes, like everything becoming more fractured, more solidified amongst a certain core of artists and less monoculture, right? Less everybody's listening to this kind of stuff.
So kind of reminds me of something I was talking about with the band last night, was where we were talking about recording plans and release schedule kind of stuff, and thinking about like how to present material. And something that we've talked about in the past, and it's something that I kind of mentioned again in that context of that conversation, was like not fitting in a niche is definitely like a big challenge for us, where we don't have a subgenre that we like can check all the boxes of and fit neatly into. And I feel like the mid 2010s is the time period where that gets really aggressive, of people going into just like very specific lanes and kind of scenes coming from that. I the big one being like, this is the time period of calling everything power pop.
Is this the beginning of that? I guess it's the beginning of it.
It's the beginning of it.
Because I feel like we're still in it to a degree. I guess the ones that are being called power pop now, though, actually sound like power pop. Whereas I guess back in 2015, they were calling stuff power pop, but it didn't really sound like it. I don't know. I guess that's right.
Like where 2015, you know, we're not in the jangle pop phase yet, but there's Worry by Jeff Rosenstock, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Rosenstock being kind of like the tip of the spear. Or We Cool was 2015, sorry. Worry was 2016. So that's like, Jeff Rosenstock is kind of the, you know, everybody followed him into power pop.
Why was he the one that people decided to follow? We're big Jeff Rosenstock haters. So like, this is not news for anyone listening to this show regularly. But why him? Why did he become the one that everybody was like, oh, Jeff Rosenstock? Was it because he was just like one of the only ones doing kind of punk music, like still punk music, you know?
Well, and out of curiosity, I pulled the power pop charts for 2015 specifically. There's some Wave stuff that gets tagged power pop. That Royal Headache record, which I saw everywhere that year. The one with the black and white cover with the water tower on it.
I'm blanking on that one.
You'll know it if you see it, but cause I know that album cover was everywhere that year. There's a Front Bottoms record.
Boo.
Yeah. Well, don't blow all your booze, because we got a Power Bottom record too.
Oh, gross.
There's the Colleen Green record, that Antarctica Vespucci record, Sports. There's a Laura Stevenson record.
She power pop?
She must have been at that point.
Because I just think of her mainly as singer-songwriter. like folk punk, indie emo kind of thing.
There's a Mike Kroll record, Turkey.
That's early. That's early for him.
That's early for him, but I mean, is it that early? I Hate Jazz was 2011. He started really early.
I don't know what this Roll with Headache record is. I've never seen this cover before in my life.
I've never seen that before. I saw it everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know what this one is.
Clear as day. It's like garagey power pop type stuff. There's a Sidekicks record, Beach Kelly Pop, Pet Cemetery, Dogs on Acid, both playing shows.
Yeah, actually
touring this year, and
our album today. I would not. Yeah, I guess there's some power pop there. I was gonna say I wouldn't call this power pop, but I guess there's enough there.
There's enough of it there. I wouldn't call it a full-on power pop record, but there's
yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of our. I mean, and we've talked about it before, where it's like punk. You say it's like it's in this downturn of, and there's like less of a monoculture. It's like I think a lot of it was the biggest audience of it shifted towards power pop.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and it becomes kind of the more overarching sound for the rest of the decade.
And what got coverage, the stuff that got critical reception, was mostly the power pop stuff.
Yeah,
but we got a little more, more shoegaze and new gaze. And
well, I was gonna say we are still very much in the emo bands figuring out how to use like pedals phase too. Like we have a turnover record, Peripheral Vision. There's Hyperview by Title Fight. There's I'm trying to think of some other similar artists. A lot of the big emo and pop punk bands from the earlier part of the decade are starting to shift into more like shoegaze and dream pop and hum, failure worship type stuff. And don't they call that time period called like the wave? Isn't that what people usually say that is?
I think people call the wave the early part of the 2010s.
I think 2015 is like the cutoff. That's like the end of the wave, I think.
Yeah.
There's still like a World Is record that year too. Yeah, it's interesting. I do find overarching trends and what becomes popular really interesting, but it's also usually nothing that I care about. And I know a lot of that is driven by more like a youth culture type thing too. Like that's who's determining what the waves are going to be. And we are not the target audience anymore.
And we weren't then.
Yeah, I guess that's more of just our personal quirks and takes and the stuff that we're listening to.
I think we were aging out of it.
Yeah, that is true.
That time period.
Yeah, 2015, I would have been 29.
Yeah, I turned 25.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm on the way out. You're still you're the age of the people playing the music, but not necessarily the fans at that stage. So yeah, we just weren't really the target audience back then. You know what we were listening to though? Let's talk about some stuff that I considered choosing for us to talk about. This was the one that I was like, should we do this one? And ultimately I decided against it because we had just recently talked about their previous band, but I really, really, really was strongly considering Winter Break and their self-titled record. We had just talked about Summer Vacation on our Top Splits episode not that long ago, so that's kind of why I was like, we can let that settle a little bit and then come back to this in the future. But I love that record. It was probably my favorite record of 2015 at the time, and I haven't spent a ton of time with it since then, but I still think of it as a record that I absolutely love. So it would have been fun to kind of go back and listen to that record. There's not much of a story there. The story there is they used to be Summer Vacation, and then one of the members quit, and so then they shortened their Summer Vacation to a Winter Break. And that's the only record they did, too. They didn't do much else. So, yeah, it's a great record, but I don't know if there was much story there. So, ultimately kind of why I was shying away from it. But if we keep it in that same scene, I was considering 10 Thermidor by Shinobu. And we were talking shit about Jeff Rosenstock, and he's on this record. He was on that version of the band Shinobu because it's always kind of just been, what's his name? Mike Huguenor's main project. Though there were other members of the earlier lineups. But this record is it's Jeff Rosenstock. It's his drummer, right? No, actually he's not. They got John Fu playing drums there. Interesting. And okay, I'm looking at these credits, and I do not remember this being how this record was credited. It just says he's a featured vocalist, Jeff Rosenstock. and just on the song Jokes. But I feel like he was playing with them live. So maybe he was just part of the live band? Because when we saw them at Fest, was he playing with them? God, it's so long ago. I can't remember now. But it kind of had his fingerprints all over it, though. And I do love that record. It's a really fun album. And they just repressed it, too. So that would be it would have been kind of worth talking about. But also, this version of Shinobu does not feel like the version we should start with. I feel like we should cover one of their other records, like Strange Spring Air or like Worst Word Ho or one of those albums before doing this one. Because this one was like kind of a comeback record, too. Because the last thing they had done prior to this record was Strange Spring Air came out in 2009. So it was already like 6 years after their last record. So yeah, I would do one of the other ones before this one. I didn't send this one to you because I found it much later, buried way back at number 1045. It is Toy Guitars In This Mess, which is way too far back there.
Yeah, I love that record. That's one of my favorite records of that decade. Never was a band that got its proper due.
Yeah, it was one of those bands where it was just like, oh, if you like Jack Dalrymple, then you'll love Toy Guitar. And that's kind of like the extent of it. It was like the people who listened to Toy Guitar were the people who were listening to One Man Army and Dead to Me, you know. So that would have been a really fun one. But we had just done a Dead to Me record not that long ago. I think it was me and Dave did that record, actually. Funnily enough, and it's not a Jack record. But also, I think, we did the One Man Army split with Alkaline Trio on our Best Splits episode too. So that's another reason why I was going to I think we just talked about them fairly recently. I was very interested in Discourse and their album Sanity Decays, which was it the lone Discourse LP? I think everything else they ever did was an EP.
Yeah, it was the one album. They had the Curse of Consciousness EP, which has the bracket red vinyl in the title on Write Your Music, because someone thought this was Discogs.
Yeah.
And I know there's more stuff like singles, other EPs that they did, but they're not on Write Your Music for whatever reason. But
yeah,
Sanity Decays was definitely the one album.
Yeah. So that would be the one to cover. I mean, I guess we could always do an EP, but
do we? No, we have our personal connection to Discourse. You know, like we kind of knew them, and Grant from Bitter Melody had put out some other stuff real early. And
yeah,
is Discourse important? Did anyone care? My memory is that they were on their way, and then it just didn't happen.
I think when they came out, everybody was like, "Oh shit, the next Foundation is here."
Yeah.
Like that was kind of the way people talked about it. But then I had to remember back then, I was like, but nobody was into Foundation when they were active. It was a case of
Foundation until they were done.
Yeah, they break up, then people care about them all of a sudden. And that didn't actually happen with Discourse, because they broke up and no one seems to really care or remember. But there was a hype around them. And yeah, and I don't know if it was is this just a case of us being too close to it? Like we were literally close to them as far as like we knew them, and you know we're supposed to play a show together. They wound up having to drop because they were recording this album.
Yeah,
I guess that would have made it interesting. But and we knew people who put out their records on Bitter Melody, on Head First.
You know what this is? I didn't remember this, but I was thinking about this for a second. Sanity Decays came out in January 2015, like 2 weeks after Nonstop Feeling by Turnstile.
Yeah.
That Turnstile record coming out sucked the air out of everybody. That record was hyped.
Yeah. And it wasn't this Discourse record on like 6131 too?
Discourse was Closed Casket.
Oh, Closed Casket. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the LP too didn't quite live up to the expectations of what the EPs had done, but
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know why. I thought it was great.
I mean, it rules. It's a great record. Were they still active? There's a point too where they just stopped being active, and then Riot Stairs comes around, which is like everybody minus what's his name?
Kyle,
who became a realtor. Yeah, I don't remember if they just like they had fizzled out already by the time the LP came out or what, but yeah, I'd have to do some research on that one. And the other record this was probably the one that I was like, maybe we do this one. but I couldn't decide if this was the record or if it's a different one. But Rose Mountain by Screaming Females. You asked me when I sent it to you, you're like, is that the one to do? And I still don't know the answer to that question. Because they are a band that they toiled for a really long time and played for a long time before getting a lot of attention. But then I feel like a lot of the stuff they got attention for was the older records. But then their most popular record is like their second to last LP, according to at least Rate Your Music. That record has 1,500 ratings. The next highest one is Rose Mountain with only 690.
Wow.
So All at Once, for some reason, is like the most popular record from them. I guess being a band forever paid off finally. But I also was like, should we just do a record like Ugly or Castle Talk? Which I feel like those are kind of the ones that people tend to talk about the most. So I don't know. I really don't know which Screaming Females record is the one to do. Because I can't tell. I can't tell at this stage.
Yeah. I don't know because I've never listened to any of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that would make it interesting to get your take on a record from a band you have not heard. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like Ugly or Castle Talk probably is the ones to do and not so much this record. But yeah, it's tough with them.
Not to go back too much, but the Discourse thing had me thinking about what hardcore in 2015 was. I was paying a fair amount of attention to hardcore in 2015. I don't know any of this shit. You know what came out that I remember that nobody cared about? When People Grow, People Go by Blacklisted.
Yeah, that's a good record.
Kick-ass record. Nobody likes it. Nobody cares
about it.
Because
It's a reunion record, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not even a reunion record. It's like a return to form record. Yeah, people don't care about that album. It was a case of maybe you shouldn't have changed your sound.
There's War on Women, self-titled.
I wouldn't even really consider that a hardcore record. Okay. I pulled some EPs. I did albums and EPs. One that was actually kind of noticeable, Gloss, Girls Living Outside of Society Shit.
Yeah.
Their EP came out that year, which it's a different kind of hardcore, but
yeah, and then they broke up immediately.
Yeah.
There's that Old Wounds record. I remember that.
Man, the further we get away from Old Wounds, the less important they feel.
Yeah, that was a moment. That
Yeah.
felt like they were going to be the beginning of something. They weren't.
Yeah. Because Death Wish kind of hardcore was still pretty popular, you know? Because like there's a Birds in a Row EP that year, Personal War. There's Drug Church's Hit Your Head. That came out that year.
Yeah.
I don't like Drug Church, but
That's still pretty far off from important Drug Church, though.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, they fucking
current
wrote
Drug
it out.
Yeah. Current Drug Church is probably more important than this era. Because also Self Defense Family was doing records and they did Heaven on Earth in 2015.
I mean, 2018 was Cheer, so that'd be the one
Yeah.
they took off. But
Yeah, I'm scrolling now. It's a weird period for hardcore. Yeah.
yeah, it's generally a weird period for punk. I mean, you've got your noise rock, post punk stuff, which kind of has always been there and seems like it will never go away.
Yeah.
There will always be like 10 noise rock bands at any given moment
Yeah.
that you know their name, their new album, whether or not they're playing in your town. Soon. It's just inescapable. Not a scene I ever actively pay attention to.
We use Rate Your Music to look at their punk charts to determine what we want to talk about. And this is the time period where just everything punk is called something different. And so you get weird charts full of stuff that's like not punk music. The number one punk record, according to Rate Your Music, at least as far as secondary influences are concerned, Death Grip's Jenny Death.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, because the Hella guy was in there. But if you look at the genres, synth punk is the one that gets them on this chart. And I'm like,
Noise rock.
yeah. Well, noise rock's not, doesn't fall under the punk umbrella, does it?
Oh, I guess it doesn't. Huh. I'm surprised. It should, because that's where it came from.
Yeah. Number 2, Viet Cong by Viet Cong, the band with the name that they were embarrassed by and changed it to Preoccupations. I guess they got yelled at enough, being like, hey, you can't call yourself that. None of you are Vietnamese.
They did get yelled at.
Yeah. That's why they changed their name. Oh, my favorite hardcore band, Little Ugly Mane. I hate this website. I hate the users of this website is really what it is. What genre is in here that's punk? None of these. Is minimal wave somehow tied in? Like noise?
Probably. If it's a
Noise?
wave genre, it probably comes out of.
Yet dark wave does not appear on these charts. Dark wave is considered a separate one, even though it's 100% directly tied into goth rock and new wave, but whatever. Oh, okay. How about my other favorite punk record? Kid Cudi's Speedin' Bullet to Heaven. Now, he might actually have a punk song on his records. So knowing him, but because he did that like stoner metal record. Wizard was the name of that band. Yeah, this is where this website gets real fucking obnoxious. What's important? What actually is actually kind of punk and kind of important from this year that we haven't mentioned already? I think we've kind of hit them all, right?
It's a Slater Kinney record.
Yeah.
This doesn't show up on the punk charts, but I think it's of interest to punks is that Julian Baker record, Sprained Ankle.
Yeah.
That Proto Martyr record.
I guess. I mean, that is still like very post-punky, so that one kind of works. The Armed, that record wasn't that important, but it's the next one that's pretty important.
Yeah, that's definitely retroactive little bump for it, but
yeah. Waxahachie, Ivy Trip.
Not an important record for her, but it was a Waxahachie. It's just one of the first few Waxahachie records. So
yeah. I mean, Neck Deep.
Fourth one?
Is it the fourth one's where she takes
It's the
off?
one after Cerulean Salt. Okay. I couldn't remember what order they were, if it was Cerulean Salt or if it was Ivy Trip. So
Neck Deep is a style of punk that's important that I have no interest in or care about, but they're there. Easy core.
Someone like Hopalong, I don't think you and I realize how popular they were.
Yeah.
They've retained a level of popularity. They haven't put out an album since 2018, and they still have over 100,000 listeners on Spotify.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like that Wonder Years record where they were like selling Wonder Years records at Target. They're like, oh, okay. Wonder Years is still a thing. In 2025, they just announced like their acoustic album, third acoustic album they're putting out. Good for them, I guess. Good for Soupy or whatever his name is. All right. Well, let's get into the actual record we're talking about. We wasted a lot of time on these charts. But maybe because there's not a lot to say about the record, but we'll see. Don't want to tip the hand too much, but all right. So 2015, I selected Imaginary Life by Worriers.
Right off the bat, I was scared watching things barely play, not even old enough to trade. Started off well, then spiraled quickly. Couldn't see the forest through how you treat me. It's a bad sign when the fights were never asking if we really belong together. Can't stop now, we've got plans, we've got plans, we've got plans.
What if I was what if I was talking about a Warriors record and you listen to the Worriers and we were just all mixed up and listened to the wrong thing?
Is there a band called Warriors?
The Warriors? The hardcore band The Warriors? You don't remember them? They're like a victory band. Like they had a ton of records. They have one coming out in 2025.
Do they have a 2015 record? No.
That would be funny, but they don't. Yes, okay. Stats of the band. Warriors were from Brooklyn, New York, but they're kind of from everywhere. They formed in 2011. This was released August 7th, 2015 on Don Giovanni Records. This is their debut full-length album. And the personnel on this record is Lauren Denizio on guitar and vocals, Rachel Rubino on guitar, Mikey Erg on drums, John McLean on guitar, Audrey Z. Whitesides on bass, and Lou Hanman on backing vocals. And this record was produced by Laura Jane Grace, which is one of the few non-Against Me records that she produced. Do you remember the other record she produced?
No.
From the now canceled Cheap Girls.
Oh, right.
That was like one of the first records she produced that wasn't her own. And yeah. Cheap Girls.
Cheap Girls.
The self-canceled band.
Yeah.
That stuck. The self-cancels work more than the... Well, because I guess they have a conscience.
Yeah.
And feel bad about what they did.
Yeah.
That's
I
usually
did a
why.
bad thing and I'm going to go away.
Yeah. And the record was engineered by Mark Hudson, who recorded albums by the bands Chiodos, Saves the Day, Hey Mercedes, Taking Back Sunday, and Against Me. So, we'll do more backstory in a minute, but what's your Warriors history?
So I listened to this record the year it came out.
Wow, you were on the pulse.
I was, and then I immediately wasn't. I lost it.
Oh, you lost the pulse. You gotta find it again.
We gotta start CPR.
No,
No, like I listened to it when it came out. I remember it coming out. I remember hearing about it coming out like kind of in advance of it, or like maybe at least the week of it being released, and being like, "Oh, it's Lauren from The Measure." I would have known them as Lauren Measure then, but
Right. Yeah. In my brain,
still
they're
going
still
by
Lauren
their
Measure.
punk name. Yeah.
I guess we should have updated to Lauren Warriors, but we never did.
So I remember knowing that it was coming out and checking it out probably like the week it was released. Which what was that? That was like, it felt like that was late in the year, August. Okay. Yeah. So I listened to it probably while I was at work. I would have been still working at the bank. So just, 8 hours of music a day.
Scanning car loans.
So I definitely listened to it, enjoyed it, maybe mentioned it in our group chat, and then got like meh kind of reactions.
Really?
I feel like that was the reaction to me talking about hearing it to like some of the group. I'm not going to single anyone out. I'm sure you know who. I don't vaguely remember that, because I remember your reaction to it too, being like, "Really, you listen to that?" Which I was like, "Yeah, why not?"
I don't know why we would have had that reaction.
I don't know if you just like heard a little bit of it and it didn't click for you guys. I don't know if you remember listening to it then, but I
wonder if part of that was none of us were Measure guys.
Yeah, and
So
I
maybe
wasn't either.
It's kind of like, huh? You listen to that? Maybe it's
Yeah.
more of just a confusion than a like, ew, what? response.
No, yeah, I don't think it was like, gross, you're listening to that band.
No, I think it
just
was
like, meh.
Who cares about The Measure is probably what we thought. And the answer is lots of people.
Yeah,
we
you
were
were the ones in the wrong.
Yeah. It was just because they were like, they're just another fest band. And
Yeah.
then, no, they weren't just another fest band. They were probably an exemplary band from that scene.
And then I probably listened to it off and on the rest of that year, and then kind of fell off. Didn't get super into it. Just enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty good record. And then I think 2017 is when the second record came out, and I just missed that one. It came out in September of 2017, and I struggled to find anything to listen to. I moved, and then I was just like not working for 3 months.
You know what doesn't help is that boring album cover they went with for that record.
Yeah, it didn't stand out.
From an artist who's known for a great visual style, too.
And it's possible that moving to Side One Dummy, I didn't get marketed to as well.
Possible. That is weird that record came out on Side One Dummy. Wasn't it initially? It was initially on. Oh, it got reissued, didn't it? Yeah, it got reissued.
I thought they moved to Side One Dummy on that next record.
No, so the record came out, I think, on Side One Dummy, and then they reissued it on 6131 because they moved to that label.
Yeah.
What was up with 6131, like, luring all the bands away? Like, they did that with Nona. They lured them away and then, like, reissued their record that was new. Still. I don't know. Someone needs to do a deep dive on 6131. What was their deal about?
But then You Or Someone You Know, in 2020, that one, I remember hearing singles for that one before it came out and being like, these are really good songs. I'm actually kind of looking forward to this record. And then like maybe went back and listened to the previous stuff and was like, hey, yeah, I remember listening to that first record and I missed the second one, and kind of was like, well, let me go back and listen and see if I enjoy them more now. And like really, really, really liked You Or Someone You Know, and then have come back to the previous records off and on over the years. And I think we saw Worriers at Fest one year.
That's
right
possible.
Before You Or Someone You Know came out.
Well, that would have been 2019 then.
It was probably the last year I went to Fest.
Yeah.
And we just had like a gap in the schedule. And I think they were probably playing before someone else that we like really wanted to see. And I was like, I like some of the Warrior stuff. Let's watch them,
That was the year that I definitely feel like we just like saw more bands that we normally wouldn't have seen just because of like schedule. Because that's over the year that like we watched both Against Me sets.
Yeah.
Like, man, I don't care about Against, like they're not a band that I'm like, oh yeah, to see them 2 nights in a row play all their albums. There was like 4 records or something like that.
So I think seeing them live helped push more interest in like the next record when it came out. It was like they were really good live, and then I like these singles. So like, yeah, I'll listen to this record when it comes out. And I've listened to everything pretty much since that record, kind of like as it's been released. And it's like, wow, this is a great band, and I slept on them for too long. And they kind of had like stretches between records that maybe didn't help.
Yeah. I was thinking about it, and I don't recall listening to Worriers before that well, okay. I knew the record was coming out in 2020, and I was already familiar with them so I had just gotten into them prior. And I think that is actually thanks to our younger brother, because this is that time period where he was saying, like, I've been listening to this band a lot lately. And he was just listening to stuff based off of similar artists on Spotify and playlist recommendations. And he was like, I'm listening to this Worriers record. I was like, really? Because he did the same thing with Screaming Females too. And I was like, really? And so I started listening to both of them, because in my mind, they're both kind of tied, partly because they were on the same label at the same time, doing different but not dissimilar styles of music.
If Worriers shredded,
yeah, maybe. If Worriers was all shredding, because that's kind of what Screaming Females is. Just all nonstop noodly guitar. But because we would have seen, then that's the same year I probably would have seen Screaming Females at Fest too. So I would have seen Screaming Females and Worriers.
And I said I've never listened to a Screaming Females records. I did watch Screaming Females at Fest.
Yeah. And I do remember somebody, it was either you or good friend Corey, Dr. Good Friend Corey, leaning over to me while Screaming Females are playing and being like, this is kind of like a lot of noise, because it's just like constant guitar noodle. But it's like, I think it's better if you're more familiar with them. So yeah, I think he's the reason why I started listening to them and got into the first two records. And then, the new one came out, and then consider myself a fan. So the one you wait for is the 2020 record for us. Now I am a fan, and I'm excited whenever there are new records coming out. I do think there is a Worriers record on the way soon as well. Which is, not too long after the 2 records in 1 year, 2 records in 2023. But yeah. So that's kind of the backstory that we have with Worriers.
So how's New England in perpetual autumn and winter? After all, did you get what you asked for? A farmhouse with parquet floors. How's the hypocrite? Are the vitamins working? I bet you'll just fake it till your point is made. Get mean in my old age. Not gonna lie, not gonna lie. I hope you.
We'll get into a little bit more of their history, though. So, Worriers formed following the end of The Measure. And while Lauren was the main songwriter of The Measure, they were still kind of viewed more as a band. And I think there are some records where like other people sing, like early Measure records have like some guy singing on them. I don't remember his name. He does some stuff too now on his own. But they were more of like a group and wrote together. And Worriers was meant to be essentially a solo project. Lauren is the only constant member on every single record. They released their debut 7-inch, Past Lives, on No Idea Records in 2011. It's funny to think of them on No Idea. Then in 2013, they released 2 EPs, Cruel Optimist on Don Giovanni Records and Sinead O Rebellion on Yo-Yo Records, which is that German record label that Reviver and Iron Sheik put all their like 7-inches out on for some fucking reason. Why? We got to import all these records now. So each record has a different lineup, but Mikey Erg and Rachel Rubino joined Worriers for the 2013 EPs, and they returned for this record. So Rachel Rubino is most notable at this point for being in the band Bridge and Tunnel, and she currently plays in Open City. And then Mikey Erg is Mikey Erg. We all know who Mikey Erg is. He's been in 80 bands. Around this time period, he had just played in the Slow Death and Houseboat and Pity Party. So those are like the couple records leading up to this year. And for this album, they brought in John McClane. He is from a band called Dead Dog. Never listened to them. but he was added as a second guitarist. I said second guitarist. There are 3 guitarists on this record. Kind of a lot. And then Audrey Z. Whitesides is of Mal Blum, which is another Don Gio band, who was replacing the previous bassist Tim Burke, who played In the Measure. And Lou Hanman of Caves is in this band as backing vocals. And at the time was dating Lauren Denizio. And I learned that they were married at one point. And I had no idea.
Weird. Okay. Didn't know that.
Did not know that. No, I didn't. So for this record, Lauren wanted to use a female musician who came from DIY to produce. And they landed on Laura Jane Grace, which was I'd say that's probably one of her biggest peaks in the punk scene. She brought in Mark Hudson, who was Against Me's front of house sound person and their tour manager, to engineer the record, because Laura doesn't produce a ton of records, and I guess she's just like, I need an engineer to do the actual, like...
Lauren doesn't do the hands-on fader.
yeah
kind of work. It's
Laura
more
Jane
of a vibe.
She's more of a Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was brought in to engineer it. And this is kind of cool. Against Me then took Worriers out on a 9-day tour to get a better grasp of the band's sound. So she was like, well, if I'm going to produce your record, I need to know your stuff. And so they brought the Worriers out. I think that's a really cool idea that can only happen with a active musician producer, because most other producers are just that, I guess, how they do, producer or engineers. So that's a very unique kind of way to, like, well, let me get to know you by playing with you for, a week and a half. So I thought that was a really cool detail. And I guess while we're here, let's talk about Don Gio. The same year, they released records by the bands California X, Peter Stampfield, who's like a banjo player. Don Gio's a weird label. Nuclear Santa Claus, Mal Blum, Downtown Boys, a band called Alice, A. Nako, Vacation, Izzy True. There's a Laura Stevenson, I believe, an EP or something from that year. Painted Zeros, Mitty Lion, Shellshag, Roadside Graves, and the big records, Predatory Headlights by Tenement and Rose Mountain by Screaming Females. They also released a Noun album, which is Marissa from Screaming Females' solo project. So Don Gio doing a lot of different stuff in 2015. Wide variety of things. All right, so what'd you think of it, revisiting this record?
This was a pretty easy one. I'm glad that you picked it, because I think it's a really good record. It is the first one, and it's the starting point. It was my starting point. So it's very familiar to me. And like I said, like, I listened to it and like lost the pulse. But in recent years that I have come back to it after being like, oh yeah, I enjoyed this band and I should listen to them again. Like, I could put this on, and I remember being really impressed with how much of it I remembered for having had like such a long, stretch of time in between listening to it. Because like I said, I listened to it that year that it came out. I really don't know that I kept listening to it into 2016 or 17. Like, it fell out so much of my listening that it wasn't like the songs weren't coming up on my Spotify like playlists of stuff that I was listening to a ton in like 2017, where I was just like holding on to any shred of punk, listening and burning myself out trying to enjoy, I don't know, the Forgetters record or whatever was coming up on my playlist a lot. It was like, okay, like, I love the Gaslight Anthem, but like, do I need to hear every song from the 59 sound on a playlist shuffled? I love Dillinger 4. Like, I'm hearing a lot of the same stuff all the time. So Worriers wasn't in that rotation. Like, I wasn't hearing those songs from that album on those playlists. So it had really fell out of my listening really fast. But I must have listened to it a lot, because going back to it a few years ago, I was like, I know a lot of the songs on here. Like, I know the melody, I know the words. Like, song titles really specifically jumped out at me, and it was like, their hooks are just great, and it's all put together super well, because it's not just the vocal melodies. Like, there's guitar parts that are just stand out, super memorable licks. So it was definitely an easy re-listen. And at this point, like, it feels like a a really familiar record, even though I haven't intensely listened to it for a long stretch of time. I've kind of like come back to it off and on, and probably more than a lot of stuff from this time period. Like I think, I think back to like 2015. Like there's records. I love that Toy Guitar record. I love the Dan Andriano record from that year.
That's a big one. I actually kind of forgot about that because you had sent that as a screenshot, and I never actually wound up coming across that record. Did they just tag that as like an alternative rock record or something on Rate Your Music?
It might be labeled indie rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that would have been in strong consideration, because that is like one of the best records from that entire year, and one of his best solo records too, if not the best.
And like I love that Toy Guitar record. I love that Dan Andriano record. I listened to them a ton for years after it, so now they're way rarer to come back to.
Yeah.
Like the Coliseum record we talked about before. I loved that record when it came out. I thought it was killer, but I don't think I've listened to it since we talked about it on the show.
That happens with this show. I feel like there's very few records that we've covered on this show that I've gone back to after we covered it on the show. And the ones that we did do, that I do that with, are the ones that I was like still listening to like every year, or at least like once or twice a year. So yeah, most of the records we've covered, I haven't been back to.
But it's just a really comfortable record to come back to. And like, I think this is something that, I feel like I've talked about Worriers before, and there's something about Lauren's voice that I find really comforting, that I think is really safe, but is also really firm and inspiring and strong. And there's a plainness. There's not a lot of like trying to do anything crazy vocally, because I don't think they need to. Like, they just have a good solid melody at the bass, and then they just sing it however comfortably they can, and it sticks. And it's like, it's rehearsed and practiced. You can tell there's a firm grasp on the technical requirements to do it, but it's not trying to blow you away with emotion or tone or anything. It's very plain, but it's really effective in how it does that, and it doesn't get in the way of the words. And there's something about it that feels confident and vulnerable, kind of equally, simultaneously. That there's nobody sings like that. There's so few people that just have that kind of voice. It's very John Kay.
Yeah. Which, it's not this record. I think it's the next record, Survival Pop. Has like a Weaker Than's ass song on it. I think it's the last song on there. It's like, oh, this is like a straight up Weaker Than's like song, which we know Lauren is a Weaker Than's fan. We know a lot about Lauren's influences. American Steel is apparently like a really, really big influence. And I think I hear that more in The Measure than I do Worriers, but yeah, I think it's there. But as a lyricist, I think John K. Sampson is a really big influence on Lauren.
There's definitely a big Tom Petty influence. I think more in like the power pop songcraft side of like how the whole band comes together, but
You've got a word for one, so there's a word for all. The smallest things have become. Which side are you on? What if I don't want something that applies to me? What if there's no better word than just not saying anything? You are fighting between rock and white boulder. We are floating between two ends that don't matter.
For me, revisiting it wasn't that long, because I had just kind of gotten into it. I was looking at my Last FM to see like when I would have listened to this. I had scrabbled the first 2 tracks of this record in 2015. So maybe you saying, I was listening to this, and I was like, I'll try it. And I tried like 2 songs and bailed. It's kind of what it looks like to me. Who knows what the circumstances were? Maybe I wasn't like in a place where I could like listen, but still, it is funny to see that I tried in 2015. But then, yeah.
All right, he said I'll listen to it, but I'm not gonna really try that hard.
But then, yeah, it's 2019. I listened to Power Couple, which was like one of the singles for the next record in 2020. And then 2020, it's like I listened to that record a ton. So this record, I would have probably listened to more in that year, getting in 2020, kind of getting into them as that record was coming out. So yeah, it was, it hadn't been that long since I listened to it. I've been listening to Worriers off and on for the last 5 years or so. So it really hadn't been that long since I'd heard this record. So revisiting it, it was like, oh, familiar for sure. Something that I was like, oh yeah, I know these songs. I'm worse and worse with lyrics the older I get. So like, I don't know lyrics to songs anymore. I used to like listen to records so much that I would learn all the words if I could, or at least what I thought the words were. And yeah, that goes away when you're like listening to nothing on repeat anymore. You just listen like once every other week if it's a new record, and then maybe it's done and gone after a month. But yeah, so this is a record that like I was pretty familiar with, and I think going into it, I knew it was probably like this is probably the strongest record front to back for my sensibilities. Maybe as a songwriter, some of the later records might be stronger, but as the full band, full album experience, this is probably the one I enjoy the most. Maybe I guess the 2020 record might be, but I'd have to do some listening. But getting into it, I was just like, man, I just like everything about this record. First thing, 28 minutes long. Love it. Love a sub 30-minute record. Can't say more high things about that. But it kind of threw me back because even in 2015, this record doesn't sound like what was current with punk music. Like this record feels like what you would have heard coming out of the fest and the orgcore scenes in like 2010, 2011, more so when the Measure were active, And it makes sense because Worriers is a continuation of the Measure and what they were doing, and the Measure were such a big piece of that sound, that Kiss of Death record sound. And so this was a little bit of a like, man, this is the they don't make music like this anymore kind of approach that I had to this record, because we really aren't getting a ton of this kind of stuff anymore. We're getting the power pop, we're getting the melodies, we're getting the hooks, but we're not getting the like crunch and the edge.
Yeah, we're not. And well, okay, we are, but when we do, we're getting too much polish.
Yeah. Okay, so polish is something I want to do. Let's talk about this record. So this at this stage was the most polished that any of Lauren's projects had gotten. The Measure stuff is all pretty rough around the edges, all super listenable. It's not like it's like hard to listen to, but it is very clearly like DIY, lower budgets, not as much time spent in the like recording process in the studio. Great stuff, but punk DIY. So this was the record that the first record that really feels like, oh, okay, yeah, we're doing something. We're going for something more on this record than the previous albums. And so what's kind of cool about it is that it is polished up from their standpoint of the music they previously put out, but because they used the engineer for Against Me and Laura Jane Grace, we get a little bit of that like scuffed up, beat up, punk edge to this record that is kind of what makes this record stand out to me the most, is just that overall kind of feel. And that being said, where I feel the production is with all of the, like, I hear it mostly in the guitars because there's like 3 guitarists on this record. I don't know who's doing what. I think there's only like 2 guitars on every song. I don't think we're getting like all 3 guitarists are playing on every single song. So I don't know who's doing what and whose part is which part. I really don't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, I don't know John McClane's guitar style, so I don't know who's contributing what. There are 2 main kind of guitar parts in here, though. There are the more rhythm kind of guitars that are in there, but there is this, the way they have mixed this record, they have each guitar kind of panned on each side, and there is a left pan guitar that is this like fuzzy, really warm guitar that I think does most of the leads on the record. I don't know who that is. Is that Lauren? Is that John McClane? Is it Rachel Rubino? If I had to guess, I don't think it's Rachel, because I don't think any of Rachel's bands have that sound. And I don't know what John McClane does. So it could be his guitar, but also could be Lauren's guitar, because Lauren's got to play live. But also Lauren might be doing rhythm. I don't know. I don't know who's playing what on this record. But there's this like fuzzy warm guitar that's in that left channel that plays all over this record. Sometimes it's a little more buried, but
it can be really buried, but it's got this sound that it's a lot like, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Rachel.
You think?
Because what it reminds me of is Latterman and Iron Sheik. It's very Long Island sound. It's very Phil.
Well, okay, you say that. Phil produced and recorded the first Worriers 7-inch. And Rachel wasn't in the band at that stage yet. So maybe that's Lauren's guitar then. Maybe.
I feel like when we saw them live, Lauren was playing more of just a rhythm guitar part. Because it's definitely like, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of gurgly and wobbly and like it's very like padding. It's not something that I think you would really play and sing.
Yeah.
Feels like it would be hard to do.
Could be. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why there's 3 guitarists on this record. I really can't figure that out.
I really only hear the 2 guitar.
Yeah.
So maybe there's just kind of some additional guitars.
Yeah. Because on the next record, John's still there, but Rachel's gone, and Lou is taking over guitars on that record. And that record has a very different production to it. Because I listened to that this week, and that one is much more like, oh yeah, they had more money for this record. There's more depth to the recording of that record, but I don't think it's mixed as well. I think this one's mixed better.
I prefer the mix of Imaginary Life over Survival Pop. Survival Pop is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, right. It's like technically correct.
There's depth and width and all of that production, that mixing approach that everybody takes and most people want and most people prefer. But this one has, I can hear everything at the same level.
This has the loudness.
Yeah.
Too. Survival Pop is not a loud record. This one's loud, which makes sense. Against Me, pretty much all their records are loud. Even like their latter material is really loud. And coming from The Measure was a loud band too. So yeah, I think that's why I like this one a little bit more than Survival Pop. Yeah. Drumming wise, Mikey Yerg's in there and he's doing his thing. Mikey Yerg there's a reason why people use him. I think there's a couple reasons why people use him. I think part of why people use him is as a musician, he's good. He sang and played drums in the Ergs. So like, oh yeah, he could play drums. We don't have to worry about technicality. He's not the most technical drummer. He doesn't do like super crazy stuff as a drummer, but he's good and reliable. And if you get Mikey Yerg, the drums are going to sound good. Also, people like him. He's friends with everybody. He's played in everybody's bands. He shows up on records all the time. Multiple records on, every band that he's ever played in. People like him. And he's a name. Having Mikey Yerg on your record at one point was a selling point. I don't think it is anymore.
I don't think he lends himself out as much anymore either.
It's true. He's not doing as much. I do think he's more focused on, I don't know what he does now, because he hasn't released a ton of music anymore. He does his own solo stuff. He does more solo stuff than he ever did before, but yeah, not with the frequency. But yeah, I don't know. It was a selling point. There's a period, it's at Fest, Mike Yerg is playing like 10 sets all weekend, because he's in everybody's band and they're like, we're in town, you gonna play with us? And you have to be a good enough drummer that you could play in 10 different bands. Or you're playing the same thing in every single band too. That's the other way. But
a little bit of that.
Yeah. It's punk drumming. Once if you know the song tempo well enough, you know the song. Because he's not rehearsing with everybody.
No. Mike Yerg is showing up and playing the songs. Mike Yerg is listening to the songs once, showing up and playing them.
Yeah. He's probably like, all right, what's the set list? All right, let me listen to those on the way to Fest.
Mikey Yerg can probably follow songs he's never played.
That's true. Which is a skill in and of itself.
It is oh my God. One of the biggest like the many myriad missteps of my life. Just like things I regret not taking advantage of or doing, or like when I was living in Arizona and I was playing with that drummer, not recording, not just like getting a demo, finding a studio and just doing the multi-track recordings ourselves. And then just playing shows with just me and him, because I could bring him a song. Dude would follow songs he'd never played before to tempo and pull off sick fills. Like, he would just know where to fill before it was there. Like, before I got to the part, he was like, here's going to be the fill. And he'd do it. It was just like, oh my God, that kind of drummer is so rare. Most drummers can just say, they'll play you a beat and it'll work because it's a beat. As long as you can follow a beat, it's fine. But to just have someone who's like, yeah, I'm going to fill here, I'm going to fill there, I'm going to have a rhythmic part that is distinct to this after hearing a song once or twice. Like,
y'all should have just done the 2-man band thing. Like,
yeah.
Y'all should have played out 2-man band style and just be. I mean, it didn't really matter because you both moved away from there. So
yeah, we just
still.
could have used actually taking advantage of the
time
because we were practicing like every week
and not playing shows. Did you ever play a show in Phoenix?
Nope.
And you practiced every week for like a couple years, right?
Until COVID.
Yeah.
Basically. So like a year, like a solid year. And we'd get a bass player to come once or twice. We'd get somebody to try out, then they don't come back. Get somebody to try out, don't come back. Get somebody who stayed for a while. We recorded some demos with him, live demos with him. Then he just like flaked, completely ghosted.
Time machine, that's one of the things you probably fix, right?
That's one of those things I'd fix. Yeah, easily.
Just play shows. Just play and record some stuff. Yeah.
That's one of those where it's like, if I get the itch someday, like I could write a bunch of songs and like email them to him and just be like, I don't need to hear. You can set up your phone and like record yourself playing along to the tracks over your PA or whatever and send them to me if you want. But truthfully, I don't even need to hear it. Here's the songs. You figure out what you want to play. I'll pay for studio time. And then you send it back to me. Like full trust to just be like, you're going to, whatever you play, it's going to be good.
Yeah. And I guess to round everything out, the bass is not buried in this. Most punk records just kind of like bury the bass, or, it's not a super noticeable part. But there are parts in this record where I'm just like, that bass player is doing something pretty fun. There's a song towards the end of the record. I think it's, which song is that? It might be Most Space. Yeah, it's Most Space. That weird like Descendants bass, talking bass thing that just happens out of nowhere in that song. It's just like, where did this come from? There's nothing on this record that sounds like it's just like weird, kind of just like, let's do a Descendants thing here. But otherwise, like the bass, there's some like bass intro songs, and like the bass does a pretty good job of like being its own thing. And this engineer did a good job of, I believe he mixed it too. But yeah, but like the standout to this record is, and always kind of has been, Lauren. Like the vocals, the lyrics. I mean, we haven't even touched any of the actual songs themselves, but They Them There, that's their most famous song. It is 4 million plays. Almost 5 million. Yeah. The next highest number, 700,000. 5 million plays on They Them Theirs. This is the non-binary anthem, because the song is actually about being non-binary and using preferred pronouns and talking about how, we have all these generally accepted terms for genres. Genres are the genders of music. Gendered terms and phrases and all this words in our vocabulary, and like, why can't we just use these why is non-binary pronouns not the default? And that's been in my head actually a lot lately, to be like, I should try and revert to non-binary pronouns, gender neutral pronouns more often, because the more you do it on your own, the easier it is to use when you're like actually talking with or about someone who is like non-binary or non-gender specific. Because I have no problem, like, it's more just like the English language practice clumsiness that I have of like, I have no problem if someone is transitioning, just switching to saying like she instead of he. Like, I can do that super easy. For some reason, they and them is like the one that I'm just like, I have to think more. So I don't know why. I think it's just because this is not an instinctive use of they and them.
I'm so used to thinking of the term, like the phrase they, them, like not like outside of the gendered, like as an alternative to she or he or any other pronouns, like as being what you use to refer to a person whose gender has not been told to you. You know that
Revealed.
there's a person coming. You don't know what they look like, who they are at all.
Yeah.
To me, that's just they. That's just a person.
Yeah.
That's just the term for a person.
It's funny because like it literally is as simple as anyone I've known who has actually transitioned from one to the other. I can go light switch easy. She? Okay. Got it. Like no problem. If for some reason they and them is the one that I'm just like they. It's just it doesn't feel right coming out of my mouth, I guess, more than anything. But but yeah, that song is like an anthem for specifically pronouns like that. But then lyrically on some of the other songs, like there's songs in here, like there's a anti-cop song, Yes All Cops. Yeah, that song fucking rules. But even if you get outside of like the social political type lyrics on this record, there are songs on here that are about relationships that are just like incredible. Like there's the song, is it Good Luck? Is the song about like moving? I think it's a song about Lou. No. Good Luck is the song about like an ex, I think, moving to the countryside. It's the one that's I Hope You Hate New England. There is another song on here that's talking about how there's a line like get used to the grid or not getting used to the grid, talking about how when Lauren moved from New York, is Lauren and Lou, because Lauren and Lou, like Lou is from London and Lauren was in New York, they're used to the grid format of the city layout, and like that's how they knew how to get around. And they like moved to like New Brunswick at one point, at least according to genius.com, so whatever this person put up there. And there's no grid there, and trying to get used to being outside of like that kind of big city that they came from. But it's also a little bit of about like, hey, we're like exploring this new space together. And then I think there's some other kind of like love type songs too as well on this record. So like we're getting a little bit of everything, you know.
It's funny to encounter the different people like who grew up with a grid and who didn't.
Yeah.
Because like Phoenix is a grid. Phoenix is one of the most gridded cities anywhere until you hit Scottsdale. Then the roads change names. Like this road's been going for like 6 miles with the same name. Oh, now it's in Scottsdale and it's got to be a different name because Scottsdale has to be special. But it's like people that I knew, it was like the grid in Phoenix. Like it's so easy to just know where everything is and like you just memorize, you know, which streets, and then you have your like there's the ones with names and then there's the numbers. And the numbers with streets are on one side and of downtown, and the ones with avenue are on the other side of downtown going north and south. And it's like and then they're like comparing to like being in Virginia and how it's just like there's no grid and you just have to remember all of the names. And then I'm like, yeah, and then like in a lot of those places your road will go across the entire county. It'll be a single road.
Yeah.
And it changes names 3 times.
I mean, that's what's like here.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what Charlotte's not a grid.
Charlotte's like that, yeah.
No grid in Charlotte.
Because what's the one in the one I'm thinking of? There's a real big long road in Charlotte that's like that, where it literally changes names 3 times.
Like what, Trade or Tryon, one of those?
No.
Those actually keep their names a lot, but yeah.
Was it like does Freedom change its name? I feel like
maybe, yeah. Well, also then there's like there's some like it's Highway 70.
Yeah.
But depending on which town you're in, it's called a different thing. It's like, oh, wait, no, it's just 70. It's just, oh, we call this one Main Street. Like, oh, that's not helpful. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really fun record. Lyrically, it's interesting. You know, there's the song that's got like a 50s style kind of like doo-wop-y sort of song structure to it. And then the song itself is about owning a home and building a home and living there for the rest of your life. And it parallels how you don't have that now. Like that's not a thing anymore. Just like a song about housing markets and job economy, you know, but kind of like staged as like picket fence kind of story in the song. And I'm not even like a lyric person. Like I tend to not even pay that much close attention to lyrics. And I think you said it earlier, like you can tell what Lauren is singing on almost all of these songs. Like they did a really good job of making sure that the lyrics and vocals were high enough in the mix that you can hear every word of the song. There's very little of it where you're like, what'd they say there? I don't know what that is. Which I always took away from what Sean Bonnet said from AJJ. He's like, always make sure your lyrics can be understood. in the mix. Like, don't bury it, because people latch onto lyrics in a way that is. I'm not one of these people. The like lyrics is the thing that I latch onto specifically about music, but for some people, lyrics is the thing that they latch onto in music, and you kind of want those people. You want those people more than you want people like me who are just like, I just like the vibes and the sound, and you want the people who are gonna hang on to the lyrics and really like take them to heart and mean something, because those people tend to be bigger fans and more dedicated fans than somebody who's just like, they got a cool guitar, like like me, you know. I listen to way more bands because I just listen to the sounds, and instead of one person listening to the same artist over and over and over again, because the lyrics mean something to them. So yeah, we're running out of time here, but overall, I think this record is great. And without going through and listening to every single record, I think it's the best Worriers album.
It probably is. I Do Love You or Someone You Know. It's definitely like,
that's probably my second favorite. Yeah,
it brought me back in and like kind of like really actually made me a fan. So it's important to me in that way.
Yeah, it is the one that I guess going back and listening, that's the one that came out new. So that one means a lot to me. But that being said, I do think the two 2023 records are great. Honestly, Survive. What is it? What's the one that's just Lauren? Is that Warm Blanket? Is that what that's called? That one I didn't like super latch onto because it's a little more quiet or introspective of a record. But the one, the actual like full band record that came out the same year, that one I really liked too. Survival Pop might be my least favorite. It's solid, but it just doesn't hook me. Like I said, without listening to all of them back to back, it's hard to say exactly. But well, you want to give it a rating?
Sure. I'm a 4.5 stars. I think I have been for a while. The whole B side is just incredible. The way the record builds.
I found your comment on Rate Your Music in that little weird comment box that they have, and you said perfect B side in there.
It really is like it hits Good Luck, and just from there to the end of the record, it's just like yes. Like Good Luck, Yes All Cops, Them, There, Theirs, really? In a row is such a great sequencing.
Yeah, I don't love the Jinx is kind of like a half song. I wish that was more of a fleshed out full song instead of like a intro kind of track, because it feels like a full song and then it just stops. And you're like, oh, okay. Plans is definitely the first full song, but yeah. Good Luck. That is like really where the string hits of just like, fuck yes, all of this. Advanced Notice, Most Space, both those songs are just really fun songs. Yeah, that rare that the B-side's better on a record, and this is one of those. I'll give it a 4. I'm gonna give it a 4.0. I really like this record. I really like it. Yeah, just a great album and a sound I wish we got a little bit more of these days. But all right, I think that will do it for us. So thank you all so much for listening, and you can follow us on all forms of social media at punklautopod, punklautopod@gmail.com, and our voicemail line 202-688-PUNK, and patreon.com/punklautopod. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.